Kate.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm hanging in there. I'm like so underwater. I'm making you
Oh,
co-host, by the way.
okay, cool. Thank you.
How are you? It's just the two of us.
I know, this is so cozy. I'm good. I'm good. Same. It's just a little bit busy with day gig, trying to get my thing off the ground. Just lots.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, if you ever want to just sit down and like brainstorm stuff on that.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yes. No, for sure. But like, I want you to like get out from underwater first.
Oh yeah. I'm getting there. I just don't even know what happened I feel like I'm still recovering from like January. I was like psyched to start January. I was like, I had gotten almost down to inbox 0, which is amazing for me. And then January, just like, oh my God. So anyways.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I completely feel you. It's just, yeah.
How's work going?
Pretty good. Just definitely juggling.
Okay. Yeah. How are things going? And like making sure that nobody else has on. Oh, we've got some more people.
We've got some people, but yeah, we'll catch up.
We'll catch up.
Oh my gosh.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Kate. Hi, everyone.
Hi, how are you?
Fabulous.
Fabulous.
It's a good day.
I always love Melissa's responses when asked how the day is going. It's always just the most amazing.
I mean, what's better than fabulous too?
I know.
That's great.
Although I will tell you, her choice of vocabulary is quite prolific on describing how the day is going.
And I start every day by setting my intention, and I am competitive with myself, right? So I got to do everything I can to get that goal on my got done list.
Oh my gosh. I actually love that, to be competitive on how like amazing you're going to feel during the day. So Melissa, you'll appreciate this. So Andrea and I know each other from Chief. We're both in the same core group. I think I've explained Chief to you before, but we have these small groups and we've been working together for once a month for what like a year and a half almost.
Oh my gosh. I think it's been 2 years.
Oh yeah. 2 years. There we go.
It's crazy. Like over 2 years now.
Oh my God. You're right. Holy cow. And we have this woman in our group who is very simple. Like she journals every day. She wakes up and she sets intentions and she does vision journaling and all this stuff. And when she starts talking to our meetings, all of us are like infatuated. We're like, oh my God, you just have to keep talking. Like, and we're it's just amazing. I think all of us like just start scribbling in our notebooks whenever she talks.
It's totally true. It's funny you say that, Kate. I was just thinking the same thing. I was thinking of her. So that's amazing. I love the energy though. So Melissa, thank you for bringing that.
Anytime. I got your back.
So it looks like we have Alexis, Chesleigh, Bell, and Brandis or Brandeis. I want to make sure I pronounce it. Brandis, who has been so amazing with all the help that she's been giving me with like just the back and forth scheduling.
Okay. I would ask if you would want to see it, but give me one moment. I'll check it out real quick. Hello, ladies. It's good to see you.
Hello.
Hi. I'll be right back.
I'm not a lady, but hi.
Hi.
You can be today, Charles. An honorary.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Hi, Andrea. How you doing?
Good, Charles. Nice to meet you finally in person.
I know, face to face, in face.
I know, exactly.
So how are you doing today?
Not bad, pretty good actually. It's, you know, it's Wednesday. It's a little bit warmer in New York. Cannot complain.
So the weather's not that bad, huh?
Thank goodness. It's been nice this week. So that's always a plus.
Is everything opened up in New York, or not really yet?
Not yet. We're still pretty much I mean, there's a lot of things open, but there's still a lot of you know, rules, and obviously just sort of like capacity rules when you're going to places.
Yeah, man. I know it's tough, because at one point when it was nice out, you know, everybody was able to like eat outside and like, you know, enjoy the weather. And you know, now it's been wintertime and it's been cold. Like, they have some places, I heard, that like they have these like little bubbles outside, but
yes, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They started indoor dining again. So, but again, that's like, I think 25% capacity. But I mean, I think people are just hungering for being together, because even in the coldest of days, I see people in their winter coats huddling outside, just, you know, having a meal. So
yeah, it's tough.
it is.
I mean, when you've been quarantined inside for so long, like people are just itching to be out.
Yes. So cold or no cold. And there are some heaters, but I mean, I've definitely been one of those people. It doesn't help. It's still cold.
Yeah. I don't know if I could do it. I think I would just stay home. Like, I'd probably do like a coffee, you know, like walk around the block or something with a friend, but
yeah.
I'm not gonna be sitting down somewhere trying to eat.
No, for
in
sure.
the cold.
It's that one. It's very tough, I have to admit. Are we waiting for a few more folks? I think so, right? From the
yes, we're gonna wait for a few more people to get in.
No worries.
Yeah, Andrea, do you want to just give a quick introduction on just kind of who you are?
Yeah.
First, while we're waiting.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm Andrea Chesleigh, everybody. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm going to be talking about building MVPs, and it's actually very near and dear to my heart, because I've been a product leader for the last 15 years, mostly consumer products and a lot of e-commerce, but building just experiences for the consumer is definitely what I specialize in. I've worked at startups, so companies like Rent the Runway, One Kings Lane. I'm at Boxed right now, where I lead product, which is basically, think of like online Costco. So we've been very busy during the pandemic. And then I've also worked at larger companies, so Zappos, Verizon, and those kind of places. So very excited to be here. So anything MVP, anything sort of like prototyping, product building, I can definitely help.
Now, have you always been in the New York area, or have you been other places?
Yeah, no, I'm from New York originally, in the city. I grew up in the Bronx. Yeah, I'm a city girl. I've lived in other cities just for work, but I always just end up coming back home.
Got it. All right. Well, we'll just give another like 60 seconds.
Okay.
If anybody else joins on, but then you can start.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much, Andrea.
All righty. I'm going to share my screen, by the way. I have a deck, and I told Brandis that I'll send this out afterwards. So if you guys have any questions, I wanted to make sure that you had some resources to look at. So let me just share my screen.
Yes. Oh, Melissa, I was able to double Dutch my 2-in-1 appointments. So I wanted to let you know.
I have to say that when you started saying that, I thought for real you meant jump rope, and I was so excited that you got in a wellness workout today.
No, listen, I do want to jump rope. My backyard is ready for me to go jump. I will not jump in the front and embarrass myself.
I hear you.
Can you guys see my screen, or what do you see? It's a little bit, I want to make sure do you see the presentation?
Yes.
Awesome. And sorry, Brandis and Charles, do you want me to wait a little bit more, or should we start?
No, I think you can start now.
I know,
if folks are
I know
able
that,
to
yeah, I know that both Tandy and Jasmine, Tandy will be a little late. She had something else. And Jasmine, I think, could not make this session.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Okay, cool. So we're here to talk about building MVPs and affordable MVPs and prototypes. So the way that I've structured this, it's very much, I want this to be a conversation. So please stop me if anybody has a question. But the way that we're going to approach this is basically breaking it up in two main sections. Which is the one-pager framework, which is I find super useful. And then the customer research, where we'll get into also the tools, depending on what stage you're at. And most of this talk is really going to focus on the importance of the pre-work before you even build anything, because in order for, I mean, the key for any MVP or prototype, for it to be affordable is if you do the planning and the pre-work, because building something that you have to rebuild and rebuild without any sort of planning or research can be pretty wasteful. So I find, as a product person, this is definitely something that I try to make sure everybody, even sort of like on my team, understands, so that you're able to make sure that you already have some foundation by the time you build. So I did give a little bit of an introduction. So as I said, I'm Andrea. I'm a product leader, and my specialty is really consumer products and services and e-commerce. But I do have, some B2B, some SaaS. So we could always talk about that too. I'm a community builder, where I actually am the co-lead of Women in Product here in New York City, where it's a non-for-profit. We connect women product managers and leaders. And I'm also a founder. I'm working on a sexual wellness startup for women. So products and services, working through that and connecting sort of peers, experts, etc. All righty. And in terms of product, I think I've already walked through this, the experiences I've had. So hopefully the reason I share this is, depending on what areas or industries you guys are at, we could definitely, I can definitely refer back to some of the things I've done in also my past lives. Okay, so far? All righty. So I'm going to talk about the one-pager framework. As I said, the way it's broken out, it's really the goal, your vision, your assumptions, critical requirements, out of scope, and competitive landscape. And I'll break that down in each of the pieces. So I always start with a goal, which is really your why, right? Like think of this as sort of like almost like a worksheet, as sort of like a planner, or like a way for you to think about approaching what you're trying to build. So first and foremost, I think, it's not so much as you focus on the solution, but really, what is this problem that you're trying to solve? What is the need state, right? And who are you solving it for? Is it for a consumer? Is it for a business? I think that's going to be absolutely critical. And why are you doing this? Why is it going to be the proper solution for this particular target audience? Just bear in mind that whatever you're thinking about, it really needs to solve that customer need, and eventually it really needs to solve it in a very, very meaningful way, right? Because what you'll probably find is that there are other products or services out there solving the same thing. So why should they pick your product or your service? You need to make sure that you are solving it significantly better than the competition. So then if you think about your vision, and this is where I was alluding to a little bit, how is your product and service unique? How is it really compelling, right? It's not enough for you to offer and solve the problem in, you know, an incremental kind of way. You really want to solve it in a 10x, even 100x kind of way, because that's how you change customer behavior, right? That is how you convince the customer to look at your solution as opposed to others. So really make sure you spend the time to lay out why is your service going to be better than others? What makes it special? What makes it different? And that could be the package that you're going to put together as your unique value proposition. And as you're thinking through this, right, you also start with, as you're thinking about the problem, you're starting to think about who the target audience is. You're going to have certain assumptions about the solution or the product or service that you're looking to build. So what are those assumptions? I would list those all out, because if you tie it back to the MVP, and we'll do this full circle towards the end, the goal of your MVP is going to be testing out these assumptions. You're going to pressure test what you're putting out in the wild, because it's your V1. It's not going to be perfect. So I would make sure that I've listed out those assumptions, and see if that is basically, is it true? Is it false? And then is there any sort of relevant background information that you need to consider, whether it is, whether it's the competition or something that you've experienced in the past related to what you're trying to build. Again, I would list all of this out. Towards the end of this presentation, I actually have a template to share with you guys, so that it really is like it's almost like the laundry list of all of this, and it can help you think through what you're trying to build. So then we go to the critical requirements, and I say critical requirements because if you think about your MVP, or if you think about your prototype, it's going to be version 1. It's going to be something you're testing out. You have to be really ruthless about what is going to be included in that V1. And also ask yourself, why is it important? Why is this a must-have? Why is this a key feature? What am I trying to learn in this version? Because otherwise it's very, very tempting to just add all the bells and whistles, and you know, that is just going to, again, bloat your MVP, when really what you really want to go for is the key things that you're trying to learn, because you could always make it better. You're trying to prove certain assumptions, and then you could then iterate from there. So don't skip this. It's very hard to really get to this point. You really have to be able to differentiate between a must-have versus a nice-to-have. So then equally important is what's out of scope. So again, it's very, very tempting to put in every single feature that you probably want out there for your product. This is your baby, this is your company. So you're going to want to make it as perfect as possible. Try to resist that feeling, because this is, again, an MVP for a reason. And so be very, very thoughtful about what you're also not going to include in this version, and maybe put it in a parking lot somewhere, just write it down. But this is something that you also should be mindful of, so that you're not bloating this first version that you're putting out in the wild. I would also make sure to do my homework around the competition. And when I say this, right, like we're tempted to look at other companies that are doing what we're trying to do, but try to look at it from a critical lens. Because I mean, certainly when you look at the competition, maybe you'll feel disheartened. Maybe you'll be worried that, okay, what they're already doing it. Why should I do it? But I really think if you approach it with a critical eye, see what they're doing well. And then also see what are they not doing well, and learn from that, right? Because what can you pull from that could then feed into your value proposition, so that you are able to make what you're building better, right? Very, very much in this sort of like notion that you want to make sure that it's 10x, 100x better. So try to really look at this more from like a critical lens. I might be going a little bit fast, so please feel free to stop me with any questions. So once you've done sort of this one-pager framework, putting all of this together, and take your time, by the way, to do this, maybe put it together, leave it alone, and then go back to it to make sure that you've got everything that you want to get done in this first version captured. And then it's time to really do some research. And this is a little bit different from your competitive analysis. This is really about talking to your potential target audience to start pressure testing it before you even build, because again, all of this pre-work will ensure that not only is your MVP or your prototype affordable, but it also has a greater potential to be successful. So why do I like to do research? It really is what I just said, right? You're developing an understanding and empathy for your customer. I mean, you really get to understand and see those pain points. You're going to have that list of assumptions that you put together in your one pager, and you're able to then validate whether those assumptions are true or not. And then being able to identify opportunities outside of the competitive research, hearing what customers have to say, both explicitly and even implicitly, will be able to make you even think, okay, how do I position this product? It will give you some ideas to how to further differentiate yourself from the competition. And then as you're building, or as you're thinking about it, through this sort of research, you'll be able to discover any of these big glaring user experience issues right away. So again, before you even start truly building, you've already addressed those. So in terms of research methods, there's a lot of different ways of doing this because this is really about building your MVP and building a prototype. I really like to start with interviews, but there are various ways to get to various methodologies that you can use for research to get to your findings. So there's usability testing. Once you've got a prototype, you might want to show it to users, see how they're interacting with it. It could also be very much field testing. So once you have a little bit more of a mature product, perhaps there's a way for you to see how a customer is using it in their own environment, whether it's trying to see if it's a B2B product in a place of business, pandemic notwithstanding, or if it's a consumer product, perhaps seeing them use it in their home. It is very, very useful because what you'll find is, for example, for me, recently at Boxed, I wanted to know how people were ordering their household essentials, and a lot of our stuff is bulk, right? And so if you think about customers who live in apartments, how do they fit all of this? How do they make their decisions? And that was a key part of it, seeing customers ordering it from their home, thinking about them thinking about, okay, how am I going to fit this big thing of paper towels? Where am I going to put it? That was really eye-opening because then, dimensions and things of that nature, adding more maybe product pictures were going to be crucial for the customer to really be able to envision how it would fit in their home. User personas also, so that you understand who you're building this for and what sort of those general characteristics are. Surveys are really great when you've done your interviews and now you want to validate it in a larger scale. So picking out some key questions to send out to a broader base. And then lastly, as people are interacting with your product, making sure to be able to see some analysis there based on like some quantitative data, whether it's Google Analytics or anything like that. So purposes of this, we talked, as I said, we're going to talk about customer interviews. And I really like customer interviews, especially for this early stage, because you're talking to real customers. It's not just sort of like, oh, I'm going to talk to my friend, I'm going to talk to my partner, I'm going to talk to my parents. Oh, sorry, do we want to mute? I'm not sure. Wait, let me see if I can mute anybody. I'll just mute everybody. Alrighty. Okay, sorry about that. And it also gives you insight into their motivation. So if you think about how we purchase, how we interact with products, how we interact with services, underlying all of that is some sort of need, right? Whether it's, physical need, a mental need, an emotional need. Understanding what your customer is feeling as they're interacting with your product, or understanding what your customer is feeling when they have that pain point, it really will give you a deeper insight into how to make sure you're not only solving that need, but you're not only solving the pain point, excuse me, but you're also addressing that need, whether it's emotional or physical or mental. Understanding their expectations of your product. Maybe there's just sort of like things that you haven't thought about, and understanding why they're not using your product. What are the barriers to entry? So having that conversation with customers is absolutely critical. So you notice a lot of pre-work we haven't even started talking about building. So when you're preparing for your customer interview, what I would say is also being mindful of what you want to ask, what you're trying to accomplish. So outlining what's going to happen. And I also have some tips for you guys to be able to use. So defining your goal. What do you want to get out of this round of interviews? Whether there's like, again, the set of assumptions that you want to prove or debunk, the questions that you really want answered. And just try to remember, as you're putting this together, it's going to be tempting to make this into a script, but don't, because you want it to be an organic conversation. You want it to be dynamic, so that if you have to skip certain questions, add certain questions, dig into something, you'll be able to. And then depending on your customer, like every participant is different, right? Some people will talk a lot. Some people just answer in 1 or 2 words, and you really have to see if you can probe further. So making sure that you're flexible. And so don't be married to the script word for word. And then as you think about your target audience, do you want to identify certain groups that you want to interview? Whether it's, for example, let's say for my day-to-day at Boxed, there's going to be the group of moms that purchase for their kids. There's going to be the single people who live in their apartments that have different needs. And so identifying those particular cohorts will be helpful, so that will also help you put together your user personas. Then as you think about trying to recruit and get people to participate in your customer interview, think about it as like jury selection. So is the target demographic that you're trying to, the cohort you're trying to interview, make sure that they use relevant products, right? If you're trying to pull together a service, for example, for that deals with tutoring or education for your children, then that is something that you want to make sure that you're interviewing people who have children. Otherwise, it's not going to be super relevant. Any sort of outliers you want to remove, because that's just going to give you extreme views, and it's not going to give you accurate accurate view of what you're trying to achieve. And then, are they an insider? Are they too close to the industry? That's also going to taint your data. So make sure you're really trying to get rid of any sort of like factor that could make your interview not as accurate or useful. Anybody who tends to be who's had a bad experience, so if it's a bitter experience, then what's going to be the focus is the negative experience, right? So it's going to be very hard to try to get fairly objective information. So I would be careful there too. And then similarly, on the flip side, if that person is a super fan, an extreme advocate of the potential product, that's also going to be an issue, because then you're also not going to get anything useful for actionable items. It's just going to be, oh, it's fantastic, I really love the product, and that's not super helpful. When you're doing interviews, I mean, again, I would say that this is very much a conversation, right? So showing appreciation for the customer's time, warming them up, being friendly and impartial. I have these sort of tips also in a document, only because you want to maximize all of this research. This is going to feed into what you're building. And so you want to try to get customers to not only tell their stories, but also be able to give you the explicit or implicit signals in terms of the customer, the pain points, as well as the solution that you're trying to build. So don't give them yes or no questions like, do you like this? Because then you're at a dead end and you can't like, you'd have to really work harder to dig into why they're saying these things. And also try not to lead. So with questions like, does this seem confusing to you? Is it not the best way to phrase it? Because now you're sort of like, almost like planting that in their heads. And then lastly, if there's like a pause, if people are silent, that's okay. That's probably their thinking time. So I would say let them process and just sort of guide them back into the conversation. So once you have all of that and you've done your interviews, you've done your notes, go back to your one pager. This is where you're now going to put it all together. And so when you go back to your one pager framework, you go back to the guide that you put together for the interviews. You look at your goals, you look at the questions, start putting together the big themes that you've observed. Start putting together your key learnings, any quotes that might help you sort of like keep the customer in the forefront. Think about the steps that you want to take. Think about as you see the themes come out, how would you address those? Think about what's critical to address now versus later, because then you could always do some follow-up research or testing. And so then you think about, okay, well, what's the right research method next? But out of all of this, you should come out with really a vetted list of requirements that you're ready to build for your MVP.
Andrea, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned outliers, and that's an interesting thought. And you might hit this later, but when you're getting maybe unsolicited feedback or unorganized feedback, so it's not in a formal process like an interview, sit-down interview series, but you may have some strong negative or positive feedback. And one here, maybe two more over here, or some months, how those pieces of feedback in the context of this product that they're building.
Sorry, Kate, you broke up a little bit in the middle.
Okay, yep, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just wondering how people might use or not use pieces of feedback on their product that might come from less organized processes.
Yeah.
So if it's over the course of a couple months, or you've got one over here and one over here, but maybe they're strong. So how do people kind of, is that an outlier? Do they get rid of it? What do you do with that?
Yeah. So I mean, if you hear it once, it's really about just sort of validation, right? Like if you hear it once, great, but there has to be this overarching theme. And I mean, I do that today, right? Like you're always going to get like the unstructured feedback from time to time. And so I would always say that you don't have to take action on every single thing. You have to understand, okay, is this part of a general theme? Oh, the cart experience is a little bit confusing because X, Y, Z, but you will see that generally as a theme. But if it's like, one or two people, I would be very, very careful taking action on just that small of a sample or that small of a base. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Because I mean, that's pretty, you don't want to build with a data point of one. Other questions? Okay, so I want to shift a little bit to the tools, and then I want to go through some of the templates that I'm going to share with you guys. But so all of this pre-work, and this is that's really the meat of this talk, because the MVP almost doesn't matter if you don't do the pre-work. All of the pre-work is going to feed into what you're going to build. And again, to stress that, right, it is going to be affordable, and it's going to have a greater chance of success if you do all that planning. And I'm sure a lot of this, feels very obvious, but we're always tempted to skip a lot of these steps. And if you do, that is, I think, the hard part about getting excited about the solution versus the problem that you're trying to solve first, because it's always like more exciting or attractive to focus on what you're building first. But then you realize very quickly as you're building it, when you don't have that purpose, you've just wasted all this time building. So again, I don't skip on all of this planning that I just went through. So now in terms of the tools, you have to ask yourself, because there's so many tools out there, what is good enough for maximum learnings? Don't obsess about putting something perfect out in the world. Think about what stage are you at in terms of trying to validate your hypothesis. Are you at a point where it's just initial concepts? So if it's initial concepts, you might decide, okay, I want to put it out there, I want to test it, but paper prototypes, like just drawing things, right? And just putting it in front of people might be the most useful thing. If you are ready to refine your idea, you might decide, okay, I'm ready to do some clickable prototypes. And that could be something that you wireframe. And again, I'll share a couple of tools that I've used in the past that are fairly easy to pick up. Is this something then that you would wireframe and then just put together in a series of like, making it sort of actionable or clickable, and you can just put it in front of a user or put it in front of a customer, but it's not fully built out? Or is it something that you're ready for a soft launch, you're ready to do some sort of production ready product? And are there some templates that you're ready to use, or any sort of like no or low code tools that you could also use, depending, again, what your budget is, what you're trying to achieve. And then, so for the examples that I'm giving, I've made the assumption that you're not going to go out there and hire a dev shop, right? Because if that's the case, then sky's the limit. I would also still say do the pre-work. Do the pre-work, even if you are planning to hire a designer, even if you're planning to hire maybe a developer, still do the pre-work, because you don't want them building based on your direction and you don't have everything all tied up. And then lastly, how complete does it need to be? So thinking about like whether it's low fidelity where it's just wireframe, so probably more applicable in the paper prototypes or clickable prototypes. Things are just for placement only. Or does it have to be high fidelity where it's full color, all the copy is set, all the images are set, and maybe that's more for a soft launch or very close to a refined state in terms of your clickable prototypes. So I want to summarize this before we go into the some of the templates, but again, make sure you're focused on your goal. Always focus on the problem that you're solving. Is it the right problem? Not necessarily the solution. And then focus on your customer. Before you even start building, understand what is this pain point? Is it an important enough pain point? What are the emotional needs attached to it? What are the mental needs? Focus on the data. Make sure that you're validating your solution before you're truly building. Talk to real customers, go through the stages, paper prototyping, clickable prototypes, etc. And don't be afraid, right? Iterate a lot. You're not going to get this correctly out of the gate. So you're going to course correct as you go along. Make sure the key thing here is as you learn and you're taking steps, you're always refining. And that's the whole point of the MVP, right? It is, how do I get the maximum learnings for the least amount of effort so that you're not wasting time, resources, effort, money, etc. So I put some resources here, and I'm always happy to talk one-on-one. I was chatting with Brandis about opening up office hours on Friday. If you guys are interested in like talking about your particular startup and how I'm happy, how I could help in any way. So in terms of resources, I talked about the one-pager framework. I have a template that you guys can use. In terms of competitive analysis, there is an article on this startup matrix. I've been using it. It's actually really, really good. It's by this guy, Eric Stromberg. So I attached that here as well. And it's like a nice Google spreadsheet. And basically, if you think about not just sort of like looking at the competition, but again, talking about what are they doing well, what are they not doing well, what can I learn from it, and then attaching it to the problem I'm trying to solve and maybe trying to solve it in various ways. This startup matrix is actually very, very helpful. I've also included some customer interview tips because listen, you're only going to get better the more you talk to customers. It really is not that you wouldn't be able to create that rapport, but it's really about making sure that you're not leading them, you're not giving them dead ends. So really just taking that into account so that you can have a very, very fruitful interview. And then in terms of taking notes, I really, really like this rainbow spreadsheet. This is basically, it allows you, it's also like a Google Doc. It allows you to just sort of like line up all your findings so that it's easy to pull out themes. And then there's a companion article on how to use it. Then I also included a paper prototype guide because ultimately there's a lot of tools out there. There's like already almost like stencils or paper that you can buy that is already in the shape of either like, you know, laptop, phone, and then there are things that you can also use stencil wise, whether it's like a little like the tab bar for an app. And so it's very easy to make even your paper prototype a little bit more not necessarily attractive, but a little bit more obvious in terms of what you're trying to test. And then lastly, a list of sample tools. So I'll go through that as well. Any questions so far?
I'm curious about the wireframe. So I'm at the point where I have my app in test flight, and I am curious if it makes sense to then go backwards, right? And create a wireframe so that I can show the example when I'm speaking with investors. Can it go backwards?
That's a great question. You definitely can, right? But I guess the only reason I would go backwards is if I'm trying to sort of like refine something. If it's something that I want to show an investor and I don't necessarily want to walk them through downloading test flight, then I would say it's not even wireframes. You might want to have, like if you're putting in a deck or something, you might want to put together high fidelity mockups actually, whether you make it clickable and then it's part of your deck, or you're walking an investor through it. Because then I do think in that case, you want to put your best foot forward. So I would go for the high fidelity mockups at that point.
Awesome. That's really helpful. And then I'm curious, where in your in your slide deck here, you had the GIF, right? There was that video. Is there any time that you've seen somebody use like custom GIF to describe what it is that they do? Because sometimes I find people wanting to know exactly what it is, what chocolate mindfulness is. And if I could just have a video in my deck that shows me looking at chocolate, smelling the chocolate, tasting the chocolate, it'd be so much easier than describing it for 30 seconds.
I see. And so who would be looking at the video? I apologize. Is it like a potential investor, or is it part of your customer interview?
Yeah, so I would say I think it would be very untraditional, but I would want it for potential investors.
Yeah, no, I think that totally makes sense. So I think for something like that, then it becomes more about the completeness of not just the mock-ups, but also video always will help to like illustrate or tell your story. So that absolutely, and I would include that in your deck. But I think if it goes back to it's still research, then I mean, you kind of sort of like, what are you going to put in that video? Because I would imagine not just sort of the telling of the story, but it might be nice to also include some of like screenshots or something within the video itself to sort of illustrate, and maybe even voiceover of after you talking about your product or interacting with it, there is a little bit of like a demo, if you will, included in that video.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Melissa, also, great question. At a higher level too, videos are always okay in a deck, especially if you think they'll bring life to what you're doing. A couple rules is make sure that they are not too long. Shoot for 30 seconds, definitely no longer than a minute. and then be very aware of when you're using that. Live, obviously that works, but if you're passing it around or if you're copying on a pitch session, making sure that that is first okay and second can work. And then if not, have a backup. So, but yes, videos can often be very great. We've had a couple of them. We don't use them a lot in our pitch sessions, but we've had a couple of people who've used very good videos in advance.
Awesome, thanks. And then this can be for later on, but I'm just curious if you've ever seen somebody go from qualitative to quantitative with customer discovery, because I have, notes and notes that are excellent and I refer to them, but I think in order to summarize and put them on a deck, people want to see numbers. And I've considered, getting an intern to do that, but just curious if you know how to reverse engineer that or convert it rather.
That is such a great question. So the customer research, right? Like if you're doing the qualitative, which is going to be like either interviews or usability tests, and it's going to be a little bit more like, maybe the sample size is a lot smaller. In order to convert it, I would take some of the things that you might want to quantify and ask them as a question, and then maybe put it out in a survey, because then you're going to be able to say X% this, X% that. And then depending on what stage you're at, again, some sort of like how people are using it, whether if you are at that stage, some Google Analytics, but that's already if you have like your MVP out there. The easiest thing is the accompanying survey that validates your customer research or your customer interviews, because then you can include not just the quotes, not just the qual, but also these sort of like the numbers, like you were saying.
Thanks so much.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know you were mentioning high fidelity mockup. So my team is currently at that stage where we're experimenting with the tool. And I just wanted to ask if anyone here has already gone to that stage. We're currently using a tool called, and I always struggle with pronouncing it, but I think it's Adalo. I just want to see if anyone here has used that platform before.
I have. Adalo, right? The code app tool?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Okay, sorry. Somebody else said that they had, so maybe hear from that person first.
Yeah, I used it. I went back and forth between that one and Bubble, and found that they had a lot in common, but Bubble had just more of what we needed. And then I ended up adapting several versions in Adalo and then sharing it with my team. But we did have some good success. It's just that when we really needed to make sure that we were building out the product the way that we had developed with our wireframes based on the research, there were just certain things that Adalo did not allow us to do. So we switched over to Bubble.
Do you mind if I ask, like, what are some of those features that you found that Adalo lacked that Bubble had?
I think it's based off of what our requirements are. I know that I wanted a lot of customization around the brand and what it looked like, and it didn't allow me to do that because I wanted it to look as close to the final product as possible, and it just didn't give me a lot of freedom. It still ended up looking very generic.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because Adalo has like it's very template based. So you're right. It doesn't have that much flexibility.
Yeah, I think it was good for like a click through interactive version, but before we have our team build, we need it to look as close to the actual final product as possible. And it just didn't give us the ability to do that. And so even though my developers are wonderful, they're not really designers. So expecting them to just kind of ideate what it should look like wasn't a safe bet to have them start the build on it. So we moved over to Bubble instead, which has far more design capabilities, and it just looks far more personalized than the version on Adalo did.
Got it. And that transition, did you find it took a lot of time, or it wasn't too bad from Adalo to Bubble?
Not a lot of time. I actually ended up hiring when I started with Adalo, I found a couple of really cool people on Fiverr to manage it initially, and it was only a couple of weeks. And then when they got back to me and gave me the final product, I was like, oh, okay, that could work. Showed it to my developers because we were going to start a build off of that, and it just, again, didn't really measure up to what we needed it to do. But then Bubble was like a 3 to 4 week time frame, so a little bit longer, but that's because we were able to personalize it far more.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. And so I guess my final question is, so you ended up actually doing all the releases on Bubble, right? Or did you do any on Adalo where you were testing it out?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of the question.
Did you end up doing any user testing with Adalo?
Yeah, so I have a small group of alpha testers who are friends and people that I've been in other, I hate to say, accelerator boot camps with, that helped go through it. And they were able to give me some feedback just based off of the requirements that I already shared with them. And then I gave them a task list of things that I needed them to be able to do while they were testing out the product, and then got general feedback around the look, the feel, if it felt competitive, and what their overall thoughts were. And so that's kind of how I got my quote unquote test done. But I think a lot of the feedback, again, because some of them have known what I've been building for like the last 7 to 8 months, they knew it wasn't quite where it needed to be. And so they suggested Bubble, and that's how I ended up over there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
No problem.
And if you ever need a user tester, happy to help out for free.
Cool. Thank you.
No, that was definitely awesome to hear too, because Adalo is always really good for just that stepping stone, but yes, it's super limited. MVP prototyping, great, but the moment you're kind of ready to open it up, like almost like the second baby step to your MVP, it is limited. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Other questions? Alrighty, so let me just quickly share a couple of quick the templates, if you will. And again, this is just sort of something that I've been using. I've also had my team use. It's just it's basically your cheat sheet or your scratch pad, right? As you're thinking about or planning out your MVP. So I talked about the one pager, have some prompts here. So these are all linked on the presentation, and we'll make sure that this goes out to everybody. Customer interview tips. I didn't want to make any assumptions in terms of like who's facilitated customer interviews or not. So just threw everything here so that it's available for you guys. And again, just sort of like, very, very quick tips that hopefully will help you get some fruitful feedback. And then lastly, some of the sample MVP and prototyping tools. So these are just some, right? Like not all, and Adalo is actually here. I put it here. And again, these are sort of, I made the assumption that these are all going to be sort of like your first foray. It's not going to be the thing that you're going to go out for like a go-to-market hard launch. So anything from like wireframing and designs, whether it's like all the sketchy stuff like Balsamic or Sketch, which will allow you to go to like all the way to high fidelity. Sometimes some people like Lucidchart. You can also do like diagrams, flow charts, et cetera, depending on your product. For clickable prototypes, I mean, I personally enjoy using Envision. There's a lot of other products out there. And then ready templates, right? I mean, we all know this. So whether it's Squarespace, Shopify, depending on if you're hiring a developer, I mean, they can customize this, or if you're doing a full custom solution, then it wouldn't be this on this list. And then if you're doing it yourself, or again, have a developer or two, whether it's a no or low code tool. I mean, there are things like Webflow and Adalo. But again, these are sort of the very soft launch MVP, taking it all the way from concept to this first version of your MVP type of tools.
Are any of these tools on the list the high fidelity mockups?
I have used Sketch for high fidelity mockups. Oh, another one that I've used, even sort of like actual beyond mockups, if you're doing the actual creative. I mean, Sketch is great. I've also used Canva. I mean, there's a lot of just sort of like very available tools out there that will take it all the way to high fidelity. I'll include Canva.
I have a quick question. So one of the things we were kind of exploring just as a backup was the possibility of purchasing like a UI kit and then using it as a starting point to customize, because a lot of the UI kits have like for example, if you want to clone something that's similar to WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever, it's already there instead of trying to find somebody completely design and then code it from scratch. Have you worked with anybody that's used those as kind of a launch pad and then had any level of success? Or would you recommend staying away from some of the kits that are already online? And I'm talking specifically about mobile apps.
So I have not done the in-between where it's kits. So it's either like as something basic like a Dalo or going full custom. I would imagine though, if that would give you sort of a almost like a shortcut, but I don't have direct experience with any of the kits, just because by the time, I guess I tend to worry that by the time I need it to be like, let's say a clone of WhatsApp, there might be some things that I could do, but at that point I'd probably be working with a developer. And at that point I would probably try to just drive the whole thing. But again, that's a preference that really is just, I haven't had any direct experience with it, so I wouldn't want to be able to, I wouldn't want to lead you one way or the other.
Thank you.
Other questions or anything that you guys want to talk through?
I actually had two more questions. In terms of the research process, how long do you think that process should take? So for example, I've read a bunch of articles online. I've spoken to different people, and I've gotten answers from anywhere of like 3 weeks to 3 months. I've gotten to the point of we're, playing with the idea of actually bringing a researcher onto the team who's just like dedicated. And I'm like, do you really need to have somebody who's a researcher if it's just something that's going to require a couple of weeks time? Or realistically, does it require somebody that's going to give you the research over the course of a few months, and then you would start developing your focus groups from there?
I would optimize, depending on your stage, but assuming like MVP or V1 or even a V2, I would still optimize for speed, because I do think that the best way to get any sort of real signal is to get it out there, get real customers to use it. So I tend to be very, I would stay away from hiring a researcher unless I feel like my product has matured enough that it would make sense. And I would definitely want to start really optimizing versus like getting like big versions out there. So I would still go for speed and do it yourself. Like 3 months is long for research.
I agree. I just wanted to get validation.
No,
you're being honest here.
No, you're right. No, your gut is right. Like, no, I definitely, the best research is having people use it, right? So.
Okay. And then, oh my goodness, I had another question. Oh, so I know that you mentioned that you have a lot of background with products that also have like an e-commerce component. So for example, in mobile apps, that would be an app that may have in-app purchases or pop-ups in-app that allow for in-app purchases. I was wondering what your thought process was around including anything that had a pop-up that linked to like an e-commerce site outside of the app in the MVP, or if that's something that should be done after maybe V1. I ask because obviously if you sell products or it links or you're selling an app, you're going to, have the inherent costs that come with selling an app in iOS. So I'm just wondering if that's something that's more of a stumbling block for early stage companies, or realistically, if you should start with that and then optimize from there, even knowing that you're going to take on those fees up front?
I would say if it's a primary feature or primary function of your product, then yes, it has to be included in your MVP, because you need to figure out if this is sort of like the right approach, if you're sort of taking the customer away, which I don't always love. But if it's a primary action you want that customer to take, but usually in this sort of like situation, my guess is if you're trying to link them out, that's not going to be a primary function of your product. And I would probably not include it in the MVP, but that's where I would start. Is it really like the action you want this user to take right off the bat?
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. And happy to talk about it in more detail, like office hours, or test your product, however I can help.
Awesome. Thank you.
Is there any like a benchmark in terms of when you have test users where you can see verifiable traction? Like, is it if you have like 100 test users or 1,000 test users, is that something you want to note as like a benchmark?
When you say test users, meaning like once your product is out in the wild, like MVP wise?
Sort of like if you can somehow also, I know, I guess like there's different stages when you are testing your MVP. So I guess the first like launch could always be like a private launch. But yeah, if you were to do it publicly and you end up actually like you're in your very beginning stages. So I guess like the first few users might be considered like beta testers or something like that. And you get a lot of users, like almost 100 or 1,000. Is there a specific benchmark that you think investors like to see?
Oof, Kate could probably weigh in on this, but in my mind, it really depends on your industry and how big that market is, because you don't want it to be so small that it feels like it's not a number that will give you a proper signal. And so I tend to go percentage, and then it's hard, right? Because even 1% sometimes will mean like 10,000 users or something, but it has to be around like, it has to be something like that in my mind, or at least in my experience, only because you want the number to be something that will give you a proper signal that investors will feel comfortable, or at least understand that this is sort of like a true snapshot of the market that you're entering. But Kate, maybe you have like a different perspective there.
No, I think I definitely also sort of think about it as meaningful percentages. So as you said, 10 out of 100 is a very different 10% than 1,000 out of 10,000 and so forth. So, and I think the other important thing about that initial group is you've got to make sure that it's somewhat those 1,000 people or a user segment will be generally transferable, at least in your initial stages of growth in terms of like customer profile. So if you have a couple of different personas, but that first group is only one, then that says something. So yeah, but I would, I think that's all I'll add.
Thank you. That was really helpful. So I understand it depends on your industry. And you said meaningful percentages are much better than like a random, like just a number. I'm just curious, like when you are projecting these, based on the data, what would I guess like denominator, because I know you said it's based on the market. I know usually markets are like based on, like they're like in dollars. So are you saying like the denominator should be like your total amount of potential users and the amount that you capture when you launch your product?
That's like a really aggressive number, but again, I would say like probably depending on your stage. So if you sort of like are trying to capture, I don't know, like the initial sort of group of 10,000 people that you had shared this with or something, what is that percentage of engagement that you're getting? So, I mean, I think about it in stages that way, as opposed to like the whole thing in one shot. So if I'm going for like, going back to the research, if I'm going for a cohort of moms, and the thing that I'm looking at is let's say New York City moms, what I would probably do is, once I understand sort of the sample size that I'm going to send this out to, it's going to be a percentage of that. And that's not great, right? Like ultimately, how representative is that of like the total market? It's not going to be that immediate build, but I have to show some data. So the denominator is going to be like that cohort number that is achievable for me at that stage. So it's again, sort of like the buildup or iterative for me, but I don't know if that's necessarily the best approach given sort of like what you're trying to do. But it just gives you like a better sort of like fighting chance to get like a realistic target of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that helps a lot. Thank you.
I thought of another question. I was wondering, in terms of
I might
Hey, Kate, you're breaking up. We can't hear you.
Sorry, am I broken up? I'm in a not great spot right now.
You were. This is a little better.
A lot clearer now.
Okay, maybe we'll pause there, Kate. I think Adonica has a question. And also, I want to make sure I'm saying your name correctly.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great.
So one of the things I ran into really early on, because I've tried this number of ways over the last year, was trying to do the wireframing myself and then going to somebody and realizing that whatever I was trying to build couldn't be built in a certain language, a specific coding language. Is there any recommendation that you might be able to share for a code language that makes the most sense for an MVP version? Like, does it need to be React? Would you recommend like any language over the other?
I mean, again, I think it depends on the resources that you have, because ideally, if you know that you want to go with like, you know, native React, or if you're looking to go one way, I mean, one, I would vet that decision unless you feel comfortable. Like for me, I would not be comfortable. I would probably sit down and talk to one of my engineer friends to make sure that I feel like I'm making the right decision. So that's one. Two, if I feel like that is something that I can invest in already, or I might not take something in a particular direction. Otherwise, I would probably go for something similar, but it doesn't have to be the scalable solution right away. So I think it really depends on resourcing, how fast you're trying to get it out there, how comfortable you are with a particular language, would be my suggestion. Because otherwise, if that's the case, I'd probably just sort of peel it back and say, well, screw it, I'm just going to put something out there. And if it's a super early stage anyway, then I'm not going to worry about what it's in. I'm just going to worry about getting it out into the wild. So I will always try to optimize for a hacky way to get something out there if it is at this early stage. But if you're at a point where this is more of an iteration, then yes, that is something that you may want to decide to invest in the right language that you're looking for, as opposed to sort of like a similar one.
Mm-hmm. And then lastly, with the number of companies that you've worked for, I was wondering if you had a recommendation on the back end structure. So for example, we were moving forward with Firebase. I was wondering if that's if it's common industry standard, if you think that there's a different backend that makes more sense.
I mean, depending on the scale of users that you're at, but Firebase is pretty common. But do you feel like that is something that Like, why would you think that you wouldn't want to go with fire-based? I guess maybe that's a better question.
So I don't have a problem with it, but I'm a non-technical founder. And so in the process of hiring and going to different people who are developers and likely to help me with the product, everybody is pitching me on what their specialty is. And so at times it's really hard to evaluate if they're just pitching me on their specialty because that's how they can do it, versus if it's technically something that's an industry norm that I should be aware of and shouldn't question.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an industry norm, but it depends where you're at. But then I'm not also a big fan of, you're building sort of like already like the scaled version, when really you could just peel back and make it sort of the base, right? So, but Firebase is definitely a very industry. It's used industry wide. Like we use it today where I'm at.
Okay, perfect.
Brandis, I know that we said we were going to go till 5:15, but I'm happy to go till 5:30 if people have more questions.
Sure, no problem. And I also would like to just note that Andrea does have an office hour this Friday, March 5th from 3:30 to 4:30. So if we're not able to get all of our questions answered today, or if you think about some additional questions that you haven't had the opportunity to think about, you still have a chance to speak with her on Friday. Also, Andrea, are you open to sharing contact information with the speakers?
Yeah, absolutely. You can share my email, or also people can connect with me on LinkedIn, however is easiest for everybody.
Okay, and then if you want to put your LinkedIn information in the email when you send me over the materials so that I can get them out to the founders, that would be great. Get them out to everyone. Does anyone have any additional questions?
I just have one question for Andrea. So, Andrea, we are a rideshare app, and we are beta testing, sort of working out some bugs and kinks. What do you suggest for someone who I'm trying to build sort of an in-house team of someone who could sort of have where we would have a maintenance plan, and maybe also look at sort of MVP too. But when you're still fundraising and trying to build the infrastructure of your company, do you have any suggestions on, sort of outsourcing CTO without CTO money, like sort of putting together a team that can sort of handle maintenance for your product?
I mean, I think at that stage, I would definitely try to outsource. So that is the right way of thinking, unless, of course, the CTO is somebody that you're looking for as a co-founder. So that's also a possibility. But at this stage, if it's truly bug squashing, maintenance, and trying to get to maybe the next level MVP, outsourcing it, I do like the referrals and working with one as opposed to like working with a firm, because sometimes that really is expensive. So also depending on your budget, but the best way, I personally think, if it's something that you're outsourcing, is asking other founders who they've worked with, something that is someone who is vetted, because it doesn't feel like you need anybody who's 40 hours full time right now. So maybe sort of like on demand, or even like 5 hours a week, depends on what the maintenance requirements are, but that's how I would do it, sort of like pay as you go if it's possible, but also with a person that is a recommendation, as opposed to just sort of like an outsourced firm.
Okay, that's great, because I'm actually meeting with the team tonight, because our customer support team will handle like sort of lower level tech issues, resetting passwords, being able to do some things, and then we'll create tickets for more complex things, and then just having someone who can turn that around quickly is what I'm concerned about, because I don't come from a tech background, so I'm covering all things tech. And so I just wanted to know, sort of what that's going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, there's different models, but definitely just having the on demand, almost like freelancer, is probably the cheapest way to go. I mean, that's what I would do.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Of course.
We've talked about testing, beta testing, and of course there's the UX experts that we want to have looking at our apps. Are there any other people, areas that we should make sure are part of our beta testing? So if we have UX expert, what would you say are the other necessities for experts that should be reviewing our apps?
I mean, I think, UX is great. I think getting it in front of real customers is great. And then, I mean, the last piece to this is once you get it out there, I mean, how do you define success? What does that really look like for you? Is it going to be like hard data? So making sure that you have access to whatever quantitative, however you can access the quantitative data is going to be critical. But make sure in your mind you've already defined what success looks like, because that's always sort of like, okay, you go, you launch something and then it's out there and you're kind of like, well, okay, how is it doing? Do I think it's good? Okay, I have 100 users. Is that good? Is that bad? What does that look like? So I would make sure that you've already established that and there is a way for you to get to that data, because that's always like the thing that people forget. I mean,
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, are there any additional questions for Andrea? If not, thank you so much, Andrea. This was really good. I learned something. You did a really great job.
Oh, look at the size of those tires. That's awesome, Brittany.
Thank you to everyone who showed up and who came. I do want to just do a very brief reminder that we do have sessions on this Friday. We have a group activity. First, we have, our first VC in residence is at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. Then we have a group activity at 1:45, and then Andrea's office hours are at 3:30.
I don't think I have an invite for the VC in residence.
Is it not on your calendar? If not, what I'll do is I will, if it's not on the calendar, I'll just go on and send out an invite to all of you. I'll just do a placeholder.
Calendar.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
The group activity at 10:40. I think it's at 10 o'clock or 10:45 on my side, but I don't see anything before then.
Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll send out a placeholder. I'll send out a calendar invite for everyone.
So, okay, yes, because I'm looking at a few different calendars. Like I've got an 8:45 office hours with advisors, and then I've got 12, 1:30, and a 3:15. I've got a couple different things from Ally. So I'm not sure which ones we're supposed to do.
We are going to be cleaning this up. We realize that there have been a couple of confusing calendar attachments. We are cleaning it up as we speak, so that there will be one quote unquote arbiter of truth for you all. And apologies for some of the changes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. If there are any more questions, or if there's anyone needs anything, I've been checking in at Slack. You can feel free to catch me there. Chesleigh, did you want to say anything?
Oh, no, I think I put it in the, I won't take up any more time. Time is finite, but I wanted to tell Andrea, I look forward to the office hours. My duct tape approach would have taken far too long, but thank you so much.
Of course. I look forward to chatting with you during office hours.
Right there.
Yes, and once again, Andrea, this was extremely informative. Thank you, everyone, for being so engaged. And it was very engaging. And like I stated, Andrea, you are amazing. I was going to say something else, but
Oh my gosh.
you
No,
are
thank you for
very
having me.
amazing. You definitely know your stuff. So
Thank you.
thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Once again, I'll be in Slack, or you have my email if you need anything. And then I'll go ahead and get you out some placeholders for Friday.
And Brandis, I'll send you the deck and the materials and my LinkedIn in a little bit, so you'll have it to share with everyone.
Okay.
Thanks
And
for having
then
me.
once sorry, that wasn't you. I'm being tried right now by my daughter. Once I receive those materials from you, I will go on and I'll send them out. I'll send them out to the ladies. Is there anything else that we have? If not,
Take good
thank
care.
you all.
Thanks all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have
Bye.
a great day.